The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 24th, 2023. I hereby appoint the Honorable Matthew M. Rosendale, Sr. to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 9th, 2023, the chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for the morning hour debate. The chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes. But in no event shall the debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the House and ask to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, there's a reason that we hold our law enforcement, our firefighters, and our paramedics in such high esteem. It's because these men and women are called to protect human life. As a doctor, I swore an oath to first do no harm and to protect the sanctity of human life, working to care for those who are vulnerable. Here in Congress, we also swore an oath to protect our country and to protect our citizens. And that means that we must all stand for life. I'm proud to stand for those who protect human life at all costs. I'm proud to have cast my vote in favor of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And the Senate must urgently take up this important piece of legislation to protect human life. Mr. Speaker, we are all called to love children who are created in the image of God. This nation must bind together and work to protect all of those, both born and unborn. And this Congress must always stand for human life. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this week we celebrate National School Choice Week and recognize that parents have the right to choose the school that is best for their children. For the past 3 years, we've seen lockdowns and curriculum that failed to provide American students with the education that they so desperately need and want. American 9-year-olds have now lost 2 decades of progress in math and reading after prolonged school shutdowns and closings. It's clear that parents need to once again have a greater say in their children's education. To make sure that that happens, Congress must act to protect these parents by passing the Parents' Bill of Rights. Parents have the right to know what their children are being taught in school. Parents have the right to see their child's school budget and the spending. And parents have the right to protect their children's privacy and to ensure that their children are safe in school. Congress must commit to passing legislation that puts students and parents first. Let's work to recover the education that was lost during the school shutdowns. And let's work to create a future that is built on freedom. Freedom for students, freedom for parents, and freedom for families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and honor the life of Andy Morris, Jr. Andy was the son of the late George Randall Morris, Sr. and Tammy Benjamin Gandhi. He grew up in a loving home and was the oldest of 3 siblings. Throughout his life, Andy was always very involved with athletics. He was a longtime member of the Brunswick Country Club and in high school was a 3-sport athlete. After high school, Andy attended Valdosta State University and then began his career with the creation of Skipper's Fish Camp. Skipper's Fish Camp became a wildly successful restaurant and one of my favorite places to eat. Above all, Andy loved being a father to his children, Trip and Addie. Andy will be remembered as a loving father that always wanted the very best for his children. Our thoughts and prayers are with Andy and with his family. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize First Bryan Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. For more than 200 years, First Bryan Baptist Church has been an important cornerstone for the Savannah community. This year, the church is celebrating its 235th anniversary. In fact, the First Bryan Baptist Church is considered one of the oldest African-American Baptist churches in the United States. The church is named for its original pastor, an enslaved man, Andrew Bryan. To celebrate the anniversary, members of the congregation put on a play that showed the history of the church's founding. The new pastor-elect, Reverend Christopher Pittman, will be the church's 20th pastor in its long storied history. Congratulations, First Bryan Baptist Church, on this wonderful anniversary. I hope your next 235 years are as successful as your first. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Tom Fanning of the Southern Company. Tom is the current chairman of the board, CEO, and president of Southern Company. For more than 42 years, Tom's excellent leadership has helped mold Southern Company into the great company it is today. Tom has been responsible for leading the nation's new nuclear initiative while at Southern Company. He has overseen the installation of 2 state-of-the-art units in Georgia, adding more than 4,000 megawatts of renewable energy since 2012. Southern Company is the only U.S. energy provider investing in an all-of-the-above approach to America's energy future. I would like to thank Tom for his decades of service and leadership to Southern Company, the 1st District of Georgia, and our country. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and honor the life of B.B. Flynn. B.B. was born in Lenoir City, Tennessee in 1921. While living in Lenoir City, B.B. and her family were some of the few Catholics in town. In fact, a priest traveled to say Mass once a month in their home. Maintaining her faith was always a strong focus for her. After high school, B.B. attended St. Mary's Memorial Hospital School of Nursing in Knoxville, Tennessee, graduating as a registered nurse in October of 1943. In 1945, she married her childhood friend and high school boyfriend, John Flynn. In 2013, B.B. was the first recipient from St. Patrick's of the Bishops Award for her significant contributions to the parish as a volunteer. B.B. and her husband, John, loved to travel in retirement, often with the retirees from Darien. She made friends wherever she went and was known for always keeping an upbeat attitude in life. She will be dearly missed by all those who knew her. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I'd known it was you, I'd come down more often. I honor the life and legacy of Russell Pierce, a constituent, a colleague, a patriot, and a dear friend. Russell passed January 5th, 2023 in Mesa, Arizona. A fifth-generation Arizonan with a deep pioneer heritage, Russell was born June 23rd, 1947 to Hal and Norma Pierce in Mesa, Arizona. Russell had humble roots, but was raised by a loving, hardworking mother who taught him that he could make his own path in the world. Driven by his faith, he knew that the principles of our divinely inspired founding documents established the United States of America as a bastion of liberty and peace. This belief ignited a sense of duty that led Russell to a life of success through service to his community, his state, and his country. He first answered the call to serve in 1965 when he joined the Arizona National Guard during the Vietnam conflict. He served honorably until 1972, and in the interim joined the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, being sworn in as a deputy in 1970. Law enforcement was in Russell's blood, as his ancestor Joe Pierce had been one of the original Arizona Rangers. 2 of his own sons, Sean and Colton, have followed Russell's example, joining the MCSO and also the Gilbert Police Department, respectively. In protecting his community, Russell demonstrated unrivaled toughness, courage, and dedication to duty. In 1977, while pursuing known gang members through a Phoenix suburb, one of them turned and fired. Russell was shot through the hand and chest, losing a finger. However, though wounded, Russell raced after the criminals and arrested them before seeking medical treatment. He received the Medal of Valor for his actions, the department's highest honor. Russell's tenacity and excellence led to steady promotions, eventually reaching the level of captain. And after his first stint at MCSO, Russell was elected to his first public office as Justice of the Peace for Mesa's new North Justice District in 1991. He earned a reputation of trust from Mesa's citizens and public officials. And he rejoined MCSO when he was appointed MCSO's chief deputy in 1993 by America's toughest sheriff, Joe Arpaio. Serving as chief deputy for the largest law enforcement organization in Arizona and the fourth largest in the United States was a monumental task. Russell developed not only a love of, but a true talent for public policy. He crafted and successfully implemented major reforms aimed at cutting millions in taxpayer costs and reducing offender recidivism. His success as chief deputy led to his appointment as director of the Arizona Governor's Office of Highway Safety, where he led the motor vehicle division. He created the ServiceArizona.com, a first-in-the-nation web service that made registration faster and simpler for Arizona motorists and exponentially reduced wait times and costs. Of course, Russell is best known nationally and locally for his work in the Arizona State Legislature. He served for 11 years representing North Mesa in the Arizona State House first and then the Arizona Senate. While in the Senate, Russell demonstrated the foresight to tackle the biggest challenges facing Arizona and its citizens. I was honored to serve with him and call him my friend and colleague. Russell authored and introduced important legislation designed to shrink government. Ultimately, he was elected Senate President and worked steadfastly to advance legislation that promoted the principles and values important to Arizonans: the right to life, sanctity of marriage, defense of our southern border, and reverence for the Constitution and God-given liberties. At times, Russell's courage to bring these issues to the front placed Arizona in front of national issues, such as the passage of SB 1070, which allowed, among other provisions, state and local enforcement of immigration law. That took foresight. It took immense courage to be the face of that legislation. Russell Pierce was ahead of his time. With the current overwhelming crisis at our southern border, we see that states take the brunt of the consequences when the federal government fails to enforce our laws and protect our citizens. Millions of Arizonans are freer, safer, and more prosperous thanks to Russell Pierce's courageous and farsighted leadership in addressing difficult public policies. Freedom-loving Americans across this great country enjoy the fruits of his efforts thanks to the respective states modeling legislation after those crafted under Russell's leadership. His professional and political legacy is truly unmatched and is only outshined by his love of God and service to his church, his loyalty to the country he loved, and most importantly, his beautiful family that survives him, his wife, Luann, his 5 children, and 13 grandchildren. To quote Russell himself, "You know where my heart is. You know it is with this great republic of ours and its freedom-loving citizens. I believe God had his hand in making America. We have the greatest document ever written by wise and virtuous men in the greatest country in the world because of freedom-loving people like you, the freedom-loving people of America. I, for one, will continue to fight to protect your freedoms from government encroachment. It is America's commitment to that freedom, personal responsibility, and moral government that makes us strong. Rest in peace, Russell, and God bless Luann and the Pierce family." I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Iowa, Mrs. Miller Meeks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize National School Choice Week and the importance of school choice. I was proud to join my colleague, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, in introducing the Choice Act last Congress, which would expand school choice options and programs for elementary and secondary school children. I look forward to working together again on similar legislation. I was also proud to join Representative John Moolenaar last week on his resolution to designate this week as National School Choice Week. In Iowa, we recognize that every child learns and processes information differently, and we've empowered parents and students to choose the school best suited to their needs. We're fortunate to have Governor Kim Reynolds, who is leading the nation in school choice policy and who has been a strong advocate for school choice throughout her tenure. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many children were forced to transition to virtual learning while some private schools stayed open. Unfortunately, this resulted in a significant drop in testing averages across core subjects like reading comprehension and math. This proved, in some instances, public schools weren't able to adapt to the needs of each individual student. However, some students in private or charter schools were able to excel because of smaller class sizes or specialized education tailored to their strengths. I'm honored to represent a state where we put parents first, where parents matter, and parents have a right to a say in their children's education instead of Washington bureaucrats. As a mother of two, I understand how important it is to ensure that your children receive the best education possible. I will continue to fight for school choice to ensure every child in America has a chance to succeed in the best possible learning environment. Our children deserve nothing less. I would also like to wish a happy birthday to my nephew. Happy birthday, Andrew. And I'd like to extend birthday wishes to Nicholas Pottenbaum, one of my very first campaign volunteers and now a health policy advisor to Senator Grassley. Happy birthday, Nick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor James Thomas Colby, an Arizonan, a decorated Navy veteran, a patriot who faithfully served my state and our country for most of his life. James Thomas Colby always introduced himself as Jim, and that's how we will be remembered by all those who knew him and those in this chamber who were his colleagues. For 22 years, Jim also was well known in his hometown of Tucson, and here in the nation's capital by the position he held, congressman. Congressman Colby died on December 3rd at the age of 80. He led a long, accomplished life, and I am honored, truly honored, to hold the House seat he held for 11 terms. Mr. Speaker, it is my great privilege as a new member of the United States House of Representatives to offer this tribute to a man I considered a friend, a mentor, and a role model. Jim was an elder statesman of Arizona politics. He was a proven vote-getter who knew how to build coalitions to achieve real results for his district, his state, and our nation. He knew how to get things done in Washington, but never forgot who sent them here and why. He was a tireless advocate for Arizona, and he brought that unique Arizona perspective to public policy debates for which this body is so well known. Jim served alongside giants, and in the process became one himself. Barry Goldwater, Mo Udall, Ed Pastor, John McCain, John Kyle. Jim knew and worked with them all. In fact, Jim got his first state taste of politics as a young man serving as a page for the legendary Senator Goldwater, who was in his final term when the voters of what was then Arizona's 5th congressional district chose Jim to be their voice in Washington. Jim was born in Illinois, the land of Lincoln, but became a champion of the party of Lincoln in Arizona. He came to the Grand Canyon State when he was 5, with his parents when he left the Midwest for a ranch in the desert of southern Arizona, just a few miles from the border with Mexico. Little did Jim know that back then that our country's relationship with Mexico would become one of his signature issues as a representative from a border state. Jim was a celebrity in big, small town of Tucson. No matter where he went, everyone knew him. Folks would approach him at the grocery store, at the gas station, or on the street. When they stopped him and called him Congressman Colby, he would always make sure to remind them, "Just call me Jim." I first met Jim when I was a student at Pima Community College. He was my hometown representative. We continued our relationship long after that first meeting over 2 decades ago. Jim gave me wise advice when I first decided to run for his former seat. And I will always remember our regular catch-up meetings at Millie's Pancake House on the east side of town. Jim was someone who came to the House not for a big title, but to do big things. And he did just that. He was an expert on trade and became one of the chief architects of the original North America Free Trade Agreement, which he was convinced was a key that opened the door for prosperity. Fiscal responsibility was important to Jim. Our environment was important to Jim. Water was important to Jim. And he was never reluctant to work across the aisle. Jim was everything a representative should be. He understood that the word representative was not a job title. It was a job description. And that's why he came back to Tucson nearly every weekend to hear firsthand what was on people's minds. Jim, my friend, on behalf of the men and women of our little corner of Arizona, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your steadfast commitment to making our district, our state, and our nation a better place. My prayers are with Hector and the Colby family. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize 3rd District native Pete McClymont for his contributions to the Nebraska beef industry. Pete was raised on a farm and ranching operation near Holdridge, Nebraska, and has maintained a lifelong commitment to growing Nebraska cattle business and advancing the state as a leader in agriculture. With steadfast excellence, Pete has fostered growth in numerous sectors of agribusiness in Nebraska and recently announced his retirement after 25 years of service in several roles with the Nebraska Cattlemen, including the last 10 as the organization's executive vice president. Nebraska's first nickname was the Beef State, and Pete's list of accomplishments in maintaining that reputation is long. Despite having to navigate the difficult conditions of disasters, drought, and market challenges, Nebraska's beef industry is better for his leadership, and we continue to be grateful for his outstanding service. Thank you. I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? O Infinite One, your love for us is great. You who are rich in mercy, bend your ear to us and hear our prayers. Draw near to us this day and allow us to experience your generous and forgiving embrace and to receive your manifold kindness. Then may we respond with the faith of our hearts and not just the ideas from our heads. for nothing we can conceive in our minds will come anywhere near to the devotion you desire of us. Help us to trust you with our innermost being, and not just rely on the work of our hands. For the tasks you set before us are best accomplished when we yield our wills to yours and align our efforts with your grace plan. For we are what you have made us to be. We are each unique witnesses to your handiwork, created to do the good work you have called us to do. Grant that all of us this day demonstrate the faith and trust you deserve in all that you have prepared for us. Then may our lives serve to glorify you as we call upon your name. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, please join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year was difficult for the American family. Under the disastrous policies of Biden and the Democrat-led Congress, inflation reached 40-year highs, causing everyday prices to skyrocket. December marked the 21st straight month that inflation was higher than real wages. As a result, Americans are relying on credit cards as payment, and nearly half are carrying debt from month to month, up 39% from last year, according to Bankrate. Credit card balances increased 15% versus last year, the largest increase in more than 20 years, according to a recent quarterly report of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. When Biden took office in 2021, inflation was 1.4%, but has risen nearly 14% since then, destroying jobs. The House Republican majority is committed to fighting inflation and lowering the cost of living, creating jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America. Our sympathy to the family of Tom Young, Sr. of Aiken, South Carolina.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House and stand and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I come before the House of Representatives to honor the legacy of Captain Jonathan Benton. Captain Benton tragically lost his life on January 16, 2023 in a small plane crash. Jonathan was a man of service. He served our country faithfully for over 25 years in the Air Force. And during that time, he was a command pilot with over 4,000 hours in the C-130 and the KC-135. He was also an instructor and an evaluator pilot. He spent over 750 days deployed in support of conflicts in Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He eventually retired as Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Air Force's Air National Guard for the state of Oklahoma. After his time in the military, Jonathan served as the CAPA Government Affairs Committee Chairman as well as the Allied Pilots Association Chairman. Jonathan never stopped serving our country. Through his role as Chairman of CAPA and APA, he has continued to advocate on behalf of Americans. To his wife, Bridget, and 2 children, Nathan and Ashley Marie, I'm truly sorry. Your husband and father was a great man. He had a great big heart and loved you all dearly. What he gave our country cannot be summed up in a 1-minute speech, but the legacy he leaves and the good works he has done will last forever. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Speaker, I'd like to address by unanimous consent or to amend or extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, I rise today in defense of the Second Amendment, which is once again under attack by the unelected federal bureaucrats in Washington. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives is seeking to reclassify firearms with pistol braces as short-barreled rifles, a classification which threatens to make criminals of tens of millions of law-abiding Americans who've already purchased these. The extra red tape, fees, and registrations that the ATF wants to require an unnecessary punishment for shooting enthusiasts who purchase perfectly legal accessories to their legal firearms. This follows a long pattern we have seen for decades in Washington anti-gun, unconstitutional policies which could never make it through Congress as a law that is imposed upon the public through rulemaking process. Americans are tired of unelected federal agencies spending their tax dollars attacking and curtailing the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. With that, I yield my time.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause B of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purposes does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 159 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 159, a bill to implement merit-based reforms to the civil service hiring system that replace degree-based hiring with skills and competency-based hiring and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congress is charged with overseeing the executive branch. This includes overseeing the general management and operations of government agencies. For the success of our government's missions and federal programs, we must have a competent and skilled workforce to deliver services to the American people, defend our nation, and execute the laws passed by Congress. However, agencies lack the tools to identify and hire the best candidates to fill these positions. The problem is that hiring for the Federal Civil Service has over-relied on the paper credentials and self-administered job proficiency assessments of candidates. The reintroduced Chance to Compete Act of 2023 ensures agencies use objective, skills-based assessments to evaluate job candidates. The private sector already uses such structured interviews, knowledge tests, and writing samples for the hiring process. It's time for the federal government to do so as well. Agencies should be able to hire professionals that can do the work, and there are many ways to build the right kind of professional expertise. H.R. 159 represents one of those rare bipartisan legislative reforms that targets a specific problem, implements tested solutions, and reflects private sector best practices. The bill codifies and improves upon the policy initiatives begun in the Trump administration and which the Biden administration is continuing to implement. I want to thank the chairwoman of the Committee on Education and Workforce, Dr. Virginia Fox, also a senior member of the House Oversight Committee, and Congressman Jerry Conley for working quickly to ready this bipartisan bill. I would also like to thank Representative Ro Khanna for again supporting this bill that will help us modernize our government. We hope that our Senate colleagues can swiftly advance this important legislation so that it can be signed into law this year. I urge my colleagues to support this important bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I rise in support of H.R. 159, the Chance to Compete Act. The bipartisan Chance to Compete Act was introduced by Representative Fox, who I see is here with us, and Representative Conley, and I thank them both for their hard work on it. The bill aims to make evaluations more useful in assessing the skills of candidates for federal positions and to alleviate inefficiencies that have long hampered the hiring process. The bill turns away from current reliance on self-assessment and attainment of educational degrees to determine candidate qualifications in the hiring process. Instead, subject matter experts and agencies would design assessments that test specific knowledge for a position for which the agency is hiring. This overhaul would better match qualified applicants with positions and expand opportunities to candidates with more diverse professional and educational backgrounds. The Chance to Compete Act aligns with the Office of Personnel Management's guidance of last May to facilitate an executive order to modernize the process of hiring federal job candidates. Establishing hiring methods that are more skills-based will improve agency managers' ability to hire people who possess the knowledge and experience to do the job and to hire from a wider array of qualified applicants. The bill also directs OPM to create an online platform for sharing candidate assessments between agencies and maintain a portal for hiring managers to find candidates who've already demonstrated their qualifications for certain positions but were not yet hired. Under this legislation, agencies may assemble talent teams to support this assessment of candidates in the hiring process. The OPM director would be required to submit annual progress reports to Congress on use of the new assessments. After 5 years, the GAO would conduct a study of the implementation of the federal job assessment reforms and their impact on the hiring process. This bill streamlines the hiring process for agencies and will shorten the time it takes to bring new, well-qualified employees on board. I thank Dr. Fox for her leadership in introducing it. The bill is the result of constructive collaboration by several members of our committee from both sides of the aisle, including Mr. Conley, and I urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting this bipartisan measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for yielding. Mr. Speaker, Republicans and Democrats can agree that every hardworking taxpayer in America deserves a federal government that's built upon a solid foundation that breeds efficiency and is peopled by those with appropriate skills, not necessarily degrees. To achieve that end, we must eliminate the bureaucratic snares that have hamstrung the federal hiring process over the course of decades, and fast. In its current state, this dilapidated and archaic hiring process serves as a deterrent to attracting qualified and high-quality candidates. The simple truth is that it seriously undermines the federal workforce's ability to serve the American people in both a proper and efficient manner. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that something must be done to turn the tide. That's precisely why I've introduced the Chance to Compete Act of 2023 alongside Representative Jerry Conley, Oversight and Accountability Committee Chairman James Comer, and Representative Ro Khanna. This legislation builds upon a solid record of bipartisan collaboration and proven success in codifying key skills-based hiring reforms. More specifically, under this legislation, federal agencies will be able better to distinguish practical performers in a field of candidates and focus on hiring individuals who can perform at the highest level in the jobs they assume within the federal government. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this much-needed bipartisan legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I reserve the balance.
The gentleman from Kentucky reserves the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
And I'll reserve my time as well.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
All right. We're ready to close. I'm ready to close.
The gentleman from Kentucky yields back the balance of his time. Reserves the balance of his time.
And I simply would urge all our
Gentleman
colleagues.
from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much. I just want to urge everyone to support passage of this bipartisan legislation. It's an auspicious way for us to begin on the Oversight Committee, and I want to salute the chairman for his wisdom in bringing this forward, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a common sense bill aimed at hiring the applicants for federal positions based on whether they have the relevant skills to do the job. The American people deserve nothing less from their federal government. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 159, as amended? Those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
What's he yelling?
Gentleman from Kentucky recognized.
Can we get a roll call on the last one, or is it?
Does the gentleman request the yeas and the nays?
I request the yeas and nays on the last vote.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number has arisen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of the Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 300 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 300, a bill to amend Chapter 3 of Title 5 United States Code to require the publication of settlements, agreements, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 300, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act. Transparency and public participation are vital to ensure the public's continued trust in our government. Federal agencies frequently use settlement agreements to resolve litigation without going through lengthy public trials. However, it's impossible for Congress and the public to determine the impact of these settlement agreements have on state and local governments and private sector entities because they must continue to follow the agency requirements these agreements mandate. Such secret negotiations and agreements essentially prevent the public from participating in important policy decisions. These federal settlement agreements impose a tremendous burden. They're often difficult to see and hard to understand. Further, state and local governments, industry stakeholders, and taxpayers can be directly affected by the settlements for years, and yet they can't provide input. This legislation seeks to correct that problem. The Settlement Agreement Information Database Act, or SED Act, requires federal agencies to submit information regarding consent decrees and settlement agreements to a public electronic database. This public resource, to be overseen by the Office of Management and Budget, will include dates, payments, attorney fees awards, and a list of state and local governments and other entities impacted by each settlement. Currently, agencies release information about settlements at their discretion and will only publicize the facts that reflect favorably upon the agency. Furthermore, the terms of the settlement agreements are often deemed confidential. Under the requirements of the said Act, if an agency believes that information regarding an agreement should remain confidential, the agency head must publish an explanation of why it is confidential. This will increase transparency and shine a much-needed light on agency settlement agreements. I want to thank my Committee on Oversight and Accountability colleagues Gary Palmer and Jerry Conley for preparing this important legislation for consideration today. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this common sense legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky reserves the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I do indeed support this significant common sense and bipartisan legislation. And I thank the chairman again, and I thank Representatives Palmer and Conley for their hard work on it. The Settlement Agreement Information Database Act will create a database of settlement agreements entered into by federal agencies relating to alleged violations of federal, civil, or criminal law, and the OMB will manage the database and set deadlines for submission. The heads of executive agencies will be required to submit details about the types of settlement agreements they've entered into, the parties who were actually involved in them, the specific violations, and the dates upon which such settlement agreements were made. All information about the settlement agreements would remain public until 5 years after they terminate. The information in the agreements would remain subject to the Freedom of Information Act, but if the head of the agency decided to keep an entire agreement confidential, he or she would be required to provide a specific explanation of that action. This legislation will substantially improve the transparency surrounding so many settlement agreements, which in the past have been very difficult for the public to access or even to find. Transparency is, of course, central to the rule of law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in support of H.R. 300, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act. The principle of open government is a hallmark of our system of governing dating as far back as the Enlightenment. The open government doctrine maintains that citizens have a right to access the federal government's records and operations to facilitate oversight of the public business. Open government principles are key to fulfilling the promise of a nation ruled by the consent of the governed. Open government requires transparency and public participation, which are vital to ensure the public's continued trust in our government. Increasingly, however, the federal agencies have entered into legally binding settlement agreements to resolve litigation without going through lengthy public trials that often provide the transparency. Unfortunately, agencies generally release limited information about these settlements. When information is published, it is usually in the form of a press release focused more on self-promoting than informing. Furthermore, federal agencies can unilaterally deem the terms of a settlement agreement confidential with no explanation. Such secret negotiations and agreements prevent the public from participating in important policy decisions made on their behalf. As a result, it is impossible for Congress and the public to determine the comprehensive impact of these settlement agreements on state and local governments, private sector entities, and taxpayers. These parties are often barred from providing input, but must continue to follow the mandated requirements, which often remain in effect for decades. Today, I'm pleased to join my colleagues on both sides of the aisle as we take this first step to correct this problem. The Settlement Agreement Information Database Act, or the SED Act, will increase the transparency of the federal government and shine a much-needed light on settlement agreements. The bill requires federal agencies to submit information regarding settlement agreements to a public electronic database. The public resource is to be overseen by the Office of Management and Budget, would include the dates, payments, attorneys' fees, awards, and a list of state, municipalities, and other entities impacted by these settlements. Under the requirements of the SED Act, if the agency believes that the information regarding an agreement should remain confidential, the agency head must publish an explanation of why it is confidential. I want to thank my colleagues for supporting this bipartisan legislation. They include Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, Representative Ami Bear, Scott Peters, Andy Barr, and French Hill. And I especially want to thank my colleague across the aisle, Representative Jerry Conley, for his leadership in introducing this bill jointly with me. In a time when Americans feel divided, it is important to come together to support common sense, good government legislation. I'm happy we could once again expedite its consideration in the House, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this common sense legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Kentucky reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I will now yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, my colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
First of all, let me express my appreciation to members of this committee, Jerry Connolly, and then to look at my friend, Mr. Raskin. I'm delighted to be on the floor with you and delighted to be on the floor with the manager of this legislation as well. I rise in support of H.R. 300, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act of 2023, which would help increase transparency of executive agencies to the public and allow the public to hold the government accountable. This is the people's house. And we were just discussing even today the enormity of the work that we have done in the powerful infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. But if there are aspects of the bill that should be directed to the people, if there's information that lets them have a fullness of what has happened on behalf of the American people, then what have we accomplished? H.R. 300 would make public certain information that...
I will yield the gentlelady an additional minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 30 seconds. Additional 30 seconds. Additional minute, excuse me.
Entered into by executive agencies by establishing a public database for reporting of agreements that cover alleged violation of civil or criminal law. The information will be disclosed to the public, including what type of settlement it is, any costs of money involved in the settlement agreement, what state and local governments are affected by the settlements, the duration, modification of such. This ties into my point earlier of knowing information about what's going on in the government in terms of our legislation. This specifically provides the information to families and businesses and communities if there's been a settlement on a matter that you are interested in. True transparency is for the government to be known by American citizens on everything we do, and one of the most hidden is the idea of settlements of cases. Maybe it's impacted a city, an individual, a family, a school, and it is important to know what these agreements are. So I'm very pleased to have this legislation in the name of transparency, and I rise to support H.R. 300 and ask my colleagues to support it enthusiastically as well. I yield back.
The gentlelady from Texas yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
We're prepared to close.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you. Well, I would say in closing, Mr. Speaker, that I was moved by what Mr. Palmer had to say, that democracy is based on consent, and consent is based on access, but there's no access if you don't have transparency. And I think about something that James Madison said, that people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. So people need to have knowledge of everything that our government is doing. And we don't want government entities entering into secret sweetheart settlements with different litigants. It's got to be open to the whole public. So I just want to thank him and thank the chairman for bringing this forward, and I'm happy to yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy we could expedite the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act's consideration today. This chamber has passed the said act with broad support 3 separate times in the 115th, 16th, and 17th Congresses. It's time the Senate acted on this important legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this necessary bipartisan legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 300 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair,
Mr.
2/3
Speaker,
being in the affirmative, the rules...
Ask for a
gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Ask for a recorded vote of the yeas and nays.
Does the gentleman seek recognition to call for the yeas and nays?
Yes.
Yes. All right. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number has risen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today. In order. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motions to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 159 and H.R. 300 and agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal if ordered. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted at 5-minute intervals. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 159 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 159, a bill to implement merit-based reforms to the civil service hiring system that replace degree-based hiring with skills and competency-based hiring and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 422, the nays are 2. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion from the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 300, on which the yeas and nays, as amended, on which the nays and yeas are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 300, a bill to amend Chapter 3 of Title 5 United States Code to require the publication of settlement agreements and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 425, the nays are 0. Recorded as present, 0. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is a question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the Journal stands approved. House will come to order, please. House will come to order, please. The House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah rise?
I hereby remove myself as a co-sponsor of H.R. 25.
Request is accepted. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the gentlewoman from Iowa, Representative Hinson, be removed as a co-sponsor of H.R. 106. She was inadvertently added through a clerical error and did not intend to co-sponsor the legislation.
Without objection, so ordered. House be in order. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. Please take your conversations outside. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to remember the life of Cecil Abar, a beloved member of Wesley Monumental United Methodist Church who recently passed away at the age of 93. Cecil was born in Iowa in 1929, and upon his graduation from high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Army during World War II. After his service, he was awarded the World War II Victory Medal. Cecil was also a leader in the private sector, locating to Savannah to become the president of the Brandiger Corporation. In this position, he led the development of large real estate projects, which have now been flourishing for decades. Despite all titles and awards he received throughout his life, he is best known as a husband to his wife Lou, a father to his 5 children, a grandfather to 16, and great-grandfather to 21. I pass on my sincere condolences to his family and friends. He will be dearly missed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey rise? Gentleman from New Jersey.
Ask consent to address the House for 1 minute, provides that I extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss smoking in the House of Representatives. In yet another self-serving move, the Republicans have allowed smoking in House offices. It violates local and federal law and threatens the public health. In the last few decades, secondhand smoke has killed more than 2.5 million Americans. It causes heart disease, lung cancer, and strokes, and is extremely dangerous to children. Local and federal laws ban smoking in public and federal buildings, and many studies have shown that there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. It is a life-threatening decision that proves Republicans do not care about the health and safety of Americans. They write the laws, but don't follow them. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the benefits of school choice cannot be overstated. On average, students participating in school choice programs perform better academically and see higher college admission rates. These factors make school choice a no-brainer, and charter schools serve as a foundational cornerstone of the educational freedom school choice delivers. Yet even as many traditional government-run schools do not meet the needs of students, President Biden is erecting unreasonable barriers for new charter schools and arbitrary funding restrictions. This is an abject attempt to expand teachers' unions' monopoly over K-12 education. A great education is a gateway to success, but Democrats are working hard to lock that gate and hide the key. Students deserve the opportunity to find a learning environment that suits them. That begins by ending Democrats' anti-charter school crusade. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate the valorous life of Lieutenant Colonel Harold Brown of Catawba Island, Ohio, who recently took his final flight to the heavens. Since 6th grade, Harold's dream was to be a pilot. By the age of 19, he made that dream a reality as a Tuskegee Airman. Harold served as an exemplary officer in the U.S. Army Air Corps, completing dozens of combat missions during World War II. Once, while on a mission, his plane was shot down and Harold was taken as a prisoner of war. This experience did not deter his service to our country. Harold served again during the brutal Korean War. Truly, he embodied the spirit of his Spitfire legendary airman. Harold's devotion to his country extended beyond the battlefield. He worked to desegregate the military, as a teacher, to inspire new generations of students, and his life was dedicated to service beyond self. Today, America honors Harold for his service. We remember what an impact his life had, and our prayers are with his loved ones. Truly, one human being can change the direction of the world for the better, and Harold Brown did that. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize National Religious Freedom Day, which was celebrated last week on January 16th. Religious Freedom Day commemorates the Virginia General Assembly's adoption of Thomas Jefferson's landmark Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom on January 16th, 1786. The statute became the basis for the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and led to freedom of religion for all Americans. We are blessed to live in a country where a person is able to practice whatever religion they so choose without fear of persecution from government. The First Amendment protects freedom of religion along with the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. This assurance of freedom gives us all the opportunity to openly practice and speak our beliefs, to allow it to speak on the House, and allows me to speak on the House floor right now. The United States is a place where all faiths can be peacefully practiced, free from fear of persecution. The very foundation of our nation, a place of freedom and liberty for all, was conceived by individuals in search of religious freedom. Mr. Speaker, the United States of America will always be a beacon of light in the world, and we will always protect our fundamental unified commitment of religious freedom. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, to address the body for 1 minute without any objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to wish one of my constituents from my hometown of Anaheim, Miss Margaret Marie Peters, a very happy 94th birthday. Margaret was born in the year of the Great Crash. From an early age, she wanted to learn, and her grandmother taught her how to read and write. She graduated first in her high school class, and she was the first to graduate from high school in her family. Later, Margaret married a decorated World War II Marine. Together, they raised 5 daughters in Anaheim. In her 40s, she attended college classes, something she always wanted to do. And later on, Margaret spent 29 years working for Disneyland. Margaret would turn 94 on February 2nd, and she had witnessed many changes in this great country. Clearly, the United States today has come a long way since 1929. Margaret, happy birthday to you, and many more. Mr. Speaker, I yield.
What purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is so recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, God created all children with unique skills and talents. We should encourage flexibility in learning to allow each student's gifts to flourish so they can live the American dream. On this National School Choice Week, we must empower America's families to have a voice, enabling them to choose a learning environment that is just right for their children, one that will both challenge that student and encourage them to develop their God-given talents. And sadly, our school children are facing years' worth of learning and development loss, which is why education freedom today is so important. According to polling done by the Federation for Children, 72% of voters polled support school choice, highlighting broad bipartisan support on this issue. A zip code should never determine a child's future. And as a member of the House Education Workforce Committee, I am committed to advancing the cause of school choice this Congress. I call on my colleagues to join me on both sides to do the same. And with that, sir, I'll yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker,
I rise on behalf of every American child who is going to bed tonight hungry. I rise on behalf of the food insecure child, the meal insecure child. Pandemic era lunch programs have expired, and that number is now 10 million. That is more than the entire populations of New York City, Washington, D.C., and Detroit combined. I was meeting with the school administrators of Farmington Hills, and they were telling me 40% of our children are food insecure. This is impacting Oakland County, Michigan. We have a bill to address this. We did last term in the Congress. Healthy Meals, Healthy Kids Act. Let's get this passed. Let's work together. My colleagues are talking about school choice. Let's make sure that when students go to school, they have lunch guaranteed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise and seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to oppose New York State's disastrous congestion pricing tax that is nothing more than a cash grab hurting middle-class and working-class families in my district, especially those first responders who are forced to commute into New York City by car. It would cost them an additional $5,000 a year to commute to work, $23 a day just to get into Midtown Manhattan. Rockland County, where I live, faces a $40 million value gap in terms of we pay $40 million more in taxes to the MTA system than services we receive. We have no one-seat option from Rockland County, and express rail service has been cut. Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess counties, commuters have received a 10% cut in express rail service. Many folks choose not to take the subway anymore because of the rise in crime. Violent felonies are up over 40% on the subways in New York City. That's why I joined Congressman Gottheimer from New Jersey in co-sponsoring the Anti-Congestion Tax Act. We will hold the MTA accountable and end this program and stop it dead in its tracks. I yield back my time.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan rise and seek recognition?
Consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to champion the American economy and to voice my support for American workers and businesses. I've just returned from a busy district work period back in West Michigan where I saw firsthand the need for a champion on economic revitalization. The district I represent has long been known for manufacturing and industry. Many global companies started right in West Michigan out of garages and storefronts, driven by their local communities and supported by their representatives in government. But we all see firsthand the difficult economic times that are taking their toll on our communities and across the United States. Just last year, my district alone lost dozens of small businesses. This is unacceptable. And it's why I'm committed to moving the American economy forward in Congress. It is so important that we, both Republicans and Democrats, support American industry and our economy. It's not only the right thing to do, it's what our constituents expect us to do. We have so much in common here, and I believe that both parties can come together, support American ingenuity and innovation. Let's get to work. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise to seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute without objection.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
The consequences of Roe have been nothing short of devastating. Reporting data indicates that nearly 64 million souls have been perished since the fateful decision in 1973. I want to take this anniversary, this 50th anniversary, a dark moment in our history, and turn it into an opportunity to remind my fellow Americans of the gift of life, a gift that I have been so blessed and fortunate to witness. My greatest joy has been the birth of my two children, Madeline and Oliver. In October, we welcomed our son, Oliver Theodore, who was a month early after my wife, Erin, had a very debilitating and uncertain pregnancy. And as we spent time in the NICU, we were blessed that our little boy got stronger every single day. And he's now very healthy. We also saw those parents in the NICU that were praying for their baby's survival after deliveries at 23 weeks. We witnessed the true miracle of life and the power of life. And we must be a nation that cherishes life and gives support to women facing unintended pregnancies. Every soul has value and has purpose, and it is my pledge that my work in this distinguished body will be to fervently and faithfully protect the unborn. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the historic achievements of Ron Klain, one of the best chiefs of staff in modern American history. Ron Klain helped craft the American Rescue Plan, finally prioritizing working families and the middle class. Ron Klain helped implement the President's vaccine plan that made Americans return to normal life. He was key in a closely divided House and Senate to passing the CHIPS and Science Act. He was key to the infrastructure bill to help the House caucus come together, progressives and moderates and Republicans. Ron Klain succeeded because he had personal relationships with so many members. I believe when history is written, he will be regarded as one of the best chiefs of staff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand tonight to offer my support for the National School Choice Week. Our public education system is in dire need of reform. School administrators seem to prioritize indoctrinating students with critical race theory, other left-wing ideology, not even actually teaching them reading, writing, or math. As a result, our student scores in these subjects are far below other nations and the past. Schools are clearly failing to prepare our children for success. Instead, they're hiding their agenda from parents who have a right to know. Parents have the right to know, and they only want the best for their children. They want to put them in better schools. They want to have the choice to do so. That's why National School Choice Week. It gives parents the option and flexibility to place their children in an institution that best fits the child's need and their values. It's a simple, popular solution to fix our failing public education system. School choice will incentivize public schools to compete for each student by offering a quality education that will improve their prospects for future success. If the education system doesn't work for students, it's time to reform it so it does. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin rise to seek recognition?
Like to speak for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
We have another issue I think that this body ought to take up and that the news media ought to be looking into. And that is another cost of the huge number of illegal immigrants entering this country. It has been brought to my attention by property developers that we already have a shortage of over 4 million rental units or residential units in the country. When we let in another 2 million people a year, what do you think happens? It further causes a shortage of rental units and sometimes single-family units in this country, which results in what? The law of supply and demand is driving up rents because of all the people coming in the country. We know already huge new expense for schools as we have to educate illegals. We know about President Biden's vow to pay for free health care for illegals, which he is fulfilling. But for the individual looking for rental units, is their rent going up $100, $200, $300 as we continue to have this shortage? It is time the press got on this issue. It's time the Congress got on this issue and let people know, particularly in southern United States, if your rents are going up, it's because all these people are being allowed in the country. Thank you.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Fischbach, is now recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Abortion is one of the greatest tragedies in our nation, and Roe v. Wade opened the door for abortions on demand until birth. Over the last 5 decades, more than 60 million unborn lives have been taken, and a tragic, irreversible mark has been left on countless mothers, fathers, and families. While there's still so much work to be done, I stand here hopeful. The pro-life community is stronger than ever, and with last year's Dobbs versus Jackson decision, this country is beginning to move in the right direction to defend the defenseless and support life. We are changing hearts and minds. Of course, we still have a long way to go in this fight, and I am proud that one of the first things that we voted on in this Congress was the Born Alive Act to protect babies who have survived an attempted abortion. I am also proud to have introduced 2 bills to help protect the unborn, women, and taxpayers. The Defund Planned Parenthood Act, which I was asked to carry by former Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, who carried the bill in the last Congress, and the Protecting Life and Taxpayers Act. We know that Americans across the country value the lives of the precious unborn babies, and it is wrong, just wrong, to force them to spend their tax dollars on something that goes against their closest held values. This evening, I am pleased to be joined by so many champions of the unborn that have to celebrate the victories and many more to come. With that, I would yield. He is here? Okay. With that, I would like to yield to the representative from Texas, who is championing the efforts with Chairman Boss to end taxpayer-funded abortions at the VA. He has been a lead sponsor of the Women's Public Health and Safety Act, which gives states the authority to exclude abortion providers like Planned Parenthood from receiving Medicaid funds. I yield 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Friday, thousands of Americans participated in a March for Life in support of the most vulnerable in our society who have no voice, the preborn. And today we continue to recognize the dignity of every individual and fight for the most fundamental right of all, the right to life. Our instincts were always right. Science has revealed that it's not just a clump of cells in the womb. At 15 weeks, babies suck their thumbs, kick, jump, have fully developed hearts, and can feel pain. What looks like a baby in the womb, revealed to us through ultrasound technology, is in fact a baby when they're born. The radical Roe v. Wade decision was based on bad science and bad jurisprudence, and I'm grateful that it was overturned. Now is the time where we as a nation must continue to build a culture that respects life and recognizes the God-given dignity of every individual, and that first inalienable right, the right to life. And despite the terror tactics we've seen come from pro-abortionists burning and vandalizing pregnancy centers and churches, the pro-life movement has not winced. Pregnancy centers across the country continue operating, providing mothers with true health care, and they're saving lives. I join with these and millions across our nation in serving as a voice for the voiceless, and I, along with my fellow colleagues here, will continue to work to advance legislation that protects the preborn and the right to life. Thank you. May I yield.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the representative from South Carolina who will be reintroducing the Ensuring Accurate and Complete Abortion Data Reporting Act, which would compel states to report both the number of abortions and the number of infants born alive after an abortion attempt. I yield 2 minutes.
Thank you, Congresswoman Fishback. Thank you so much for leading this special order. I rise today to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade decision. A year ago, the Supreme Court has decided to allow the states to handle the issue of abortion themselves, ending more than 49 years of heartbreaking federal precedent. When we celebrate pro-life victories like this, we should not do so in a way that causes emotional pain to those women who have had an abortion, nor should we back down from being unapologetically pro-life. I believe that abortion as a matter of convenience or everyday birth control is flat out wrong. I'd like to recognize the contributions of pro-life pregnancy centers throughout our nation that offer compassionate support and care to women as they choose to become mothers and bring life into this world. The Palmetto Women's Center in my district is focused on uniting hope, health, and healing to women as they bring children into the world. The center is working to lower the number of abortions in South Carolina and supporting women as they choose life for their children. I applaud that work in the pro-life, and I will continue to be an advocate for all that they do. Although giving the power on how to handle the issues of abortion back to the states through the favorable Dobbs ruling is a big win, it does not mean the work of pro-life movement is done. Action at the state and local level will only grow in importance in the coming years. I will continue to be a voice for the voiceless. I yield back.
And thank you very much. I know that we will all continue to be a voice for the voiceless. It is so important, and our work is not done. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to another defender of life, the representative from Utah.
Thank you, Representative Fischbach. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our country grapples with how to respond to this pressing moment facing women, families, and children, I believe we must strive for a better, more compassionate future. All Americans want women and their babies to be safe, loved, and empowered, no matter their situation or socioeconomic status. I believe Americans are capable of seizing this moment and coming together to support those facing tremendous challenges and uncertainty. We can support critical, comprehensive services for women in need. We can make it easier for working-class families to earn money and raise children, and we can support the rights and dignity of our youngest Americans. This month, I was elected to serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and I intend to use this position to do better by American families. We owe our most vulnerable children more effective policies that give them a better runway to achieve their dreams in a broken world. I'm engaging on Title IV-B and Title IV-E programs to ensure that child welfare and foster care programs are as evidence-based as MCV. I'm engaging on the Connecting Forever Families Act to expedite foster care placements and help child welfare courts adopt new procedures to address the unacceptable delays and backlogs for children waiting for placements in supportive homes. I will fight for children in foster care who have to spend nights in shelters, government offices, or other inappropriate settings because of our congregate care crisis. And I'm shedding the light on the unfair audit rates of families who have claimed the adoption tax credit, 70% of whom were audited in the most recent available data. Children are obviously our future, and we must work harder to ensure every child has the opportunity and resources to thrive and succeed. And I yield back.
Thank you so much for all of your work. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the representative from Georgia who reintroduced the Protect the Unborn Act last week to prohibit the implementation of and funding for President Biden's pro-abortion executive orders.
Thank you, Congresswoman Fischbach. Mr. Speaker, this past Sunday, on January the 22nd, our nation mourned the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, the treacherous ruling that paved the way for the murder of more than 60 million innocent babies, all precious, all worth saving, and all made in the perfect image of God. Thankfully, the victorious Dobbs ruling overturned Roe last year, rightfully returning the issue of abortion back to the states. However, while we champion this momentous win in the fight for the unborn, we cannot forget the millions of lives lost to the evils of abortion. Today, I introduced a resolution to recognize January the 22nd as the Day of Tears, to honor and mourn the loss of these unborn children. But in the face of President Biden's pro-abortion agenda, we must do more to defend the sanctity of human life. May God raise up more warriors to protect innocent life, because life, after all, is our first and foremost fundamental, unalienable right. Last week, I proudly introduced, with nearly 90 original co-sponsors, the Protect the Unborn Act to block and defund President Biden's pro-abortion executive orders. Congress must take action to protect the unborn and prevent taxpayer dollars from funding the left's radical and destructive abortion agenda. We must never downplay the evils of abortion. As an unapologetic pro-life advocate, I am proud to defend the unborn and fight for the sanctity of life. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 1 minute to the representative from Colorado, who is looking forward to reintroducing the Second Chance at Life Act, which would require abortion facilities to provide information at least 24 hours in advance that explains that the chemical abortion process may be reversed before taking the second of the 2 drugs required. I yield 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady. Mr. Speaker, I rise to remember the lives lost due to the Roe v. Wade decision. There are an estimated 64 million American souls who are missing as a result. We gather today on this 50th anniversary solemnly but hopefully. As members of Congress, we are tasked with representing our constituents, even the unborn ones. I will always speak out and fight to protect the sanctity of these lives. It's difficult to imagine how, as a nation, we allowed this decision to stand for almost 50 years. But I have hope, and I know that the Supreme Court has provided for us a brighter future with their decision in Dobbs. Last Congress, as was just stated, I introduced the Second Chance at Life Act. Chemical abortions can be reversed with no harm to the child if the pregnant mother develops second thoughts midway through the chemical abortion process. My legislation, again this Congress, will give the opportunity for life for thousands of unborn children. So I want to thank Representative Smith and Representative Fischbach for their leadership in the Pro-Life Caucus and for holding this special order. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
And thank you very much for your pro-life leadership. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to a great defender of life, the representative from Texas.
Thank you so very much, and I really appreciate you and Chris Smith, the gentlelady from Minnesota. Thank you, Ms. Fischbach, for having this special order. Mr. Speaker, today we mourn the millions of babies lost because of the decision in Roe versus Wade 53 years ago. We also celebrate the millions that will be saved now because that decision has been overturned. Tragically, my Democrat colleagues would rather spread lies about the Supreme Court's decision than to tell the truth. They want to deceive you into believing that Republicans don't care about women's health. And it's crazy. Even as they enable and encourage biological men to use women's bathrooms and to compete in women's sports. And they are content to simply watch violent pro-abortion thugs attack and burn pregnancy centers and churches around the country. They may refuse the truth because it doesn't further their anti-life agenda, but they can't change it. The truth is that the reversal of Roe versus Wade returned the power where it belongs, and that is to the states. So today I celebrate that decision. I pray for those taken and renew my promise to never surrender the fight for our unborn. I will always defend the voiceless, and I will always stand for life. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Well, thank you very much for your commitment to the unborn. I appreciate that. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the freshman from Tennessee and a great pro-lifer. I yield 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Fischbach. Mr. Speaker, 50 years ago, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that will live in infamy. Because of that opinion, over 63 million unborn children have lost their lives due to abortion. In time, future generations will look back at this moment in American history and wonder how the greatest country in the world could have permitted modern-day slaughter of the innocent. Our nation has dehumanized those who are seen as a burden. Comfort and convenience are now the new cardinal virtues of our modern society. It is this mentality, this historic decay of the value of life, that has allowed our nation to treat the unborn as disposable commodities. Over the last 5 decades, we have treated the unborn as problems to be solved rather than children to be loved. Due to the incredible work of millions of patriotic Americans, Abortion has been consigned to the ash heap of history. On this day, we thank those Americans for over 50 years willingly and joyfully stood outside in the January cold for the March for Life. On June 24, 2022, the United States of America declared to the world that once again our nation will embrace the intrinsic worth and value of every human life. This is a reminder, however, that our work is not yet done. We will continue to work and convince hearts and minds that the culture of life is worth preserving. May all those who work to promote the cause of life forever know that their cause is true, their cause is beautiful, and their cause is good. Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time.
And thank you for your commitment to the unborn and those wonderful words. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to a proud father, grandfather, and great-grandfather committed to fighting for life. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give voice to the voiceless all across our country and to speak out against the culture of death that has been perpetuated by the abortion industry here in America. You know, our founding fathers enshrined in the Declaration of Independence the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I thought it very telling that our Vice President, when speaking on this very issue just the other day, only mentioned 2 of those unalienable rights. Only 2 of them. She left out life. I think she left out life because that's where we're at now. We talk about a culture of death in this community. We don't talk about life. Our nation cannot sit idly by as 1 million unborn children have this life taken from them every year. Every year. This is advancing and normalizing this culture of death. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to stand before you now and celebrate the fact that this culture of death is turning. The Supreme Court Dobbs decision doesn't end abortion in America, but by placing abortion decisions at the state level where it belongs, voters now have a greater voice in shaping our abortion laws. But that doesn't stop our resolve at the federal level. Throughout my time in Congress, I've fought to pass laws that respect life at every stage, from conception to natural death, and support both mothers and babies, before and after birth. Earlier this month, I proudly joined with my colleagues in the House to pass H.R. 26, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which simply ensures that babies who survive failed abortions receive the same life-saving care that all babies should receive. It's amazing to me that we have to pass a law like this. And last week, I joined Congressman Alex Mooney to again reintroduce the Life at Conception Act, which recognizes the humanity and life of the unborn and ensures they receive equal protection under the 14th Amendment. Mr. Speaker, whether we take a child's life in the womb or we take it at first in Maine, that's simply geography. Life is our most precious gift from God, and it is our obligation to protect the most basic of rights for our next generation. Without a yield back.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned the culture of death, but we are working and we are succeeding in turning that into the culture of life. Amen. We are changing hearts and minds. So thank you very much for your comments. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to my great friend, my colleague from Minnesota, a true champion of life, the representative from Minnesota. 2 minutes I would yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Fischbach, for allowing me to speak and for your leadership on this issue. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the 50th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. Over the past 5 decades, we have seen the devastation of this ruling, which has led to the loss of tens of millions of innocent lives here in the United States. I am heartened by the Supreme Court's reversal of this decision in Dobbs v. Jackson last year and the countless lives that will now be saved each year. For me and my family, the sanctity of life is deeply personal. Nearly 20 years ago, my wife, Jody, and I became parents of a baby born with Down syndrome. And whenever I look at my son, Isaac, I see a miracle, God's special gift to our family. Today, Isaac is an incredible, kind, and charming young man, and we know his future is bright. Now imagine what kind of world we would be living in if every child was given the same chance to reach their potential. The world would be much better, and our collective future would be much brighter. Since the start of the current Congress, the House has voted on 2 bills to protect and support life. I am proud that all of my Republican colleagues join me in supporting these very important measures. Unfortunately, very few of my Democrat colleagues joined us in support. To those Democrats who joined us in defending life, I commend you for your courage to stand up to the radical wing of your party, which pushes for abortion on demand, without limits, and paid for with taxpayer dollars. The right to life should not be a partisan issue. I extend an olive branch to all of my Democratic colleagues from across the aisle and encourage them to join us in our fight for life and to protect the most innocent among us, the unborn. It is up to us to do what is right and always defend life. And I yield back.
Thank you, and I thank you for sharing your personal story and that strong, true support for life. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the representative from Pennsylvania who introduced the Heartbeat Protection Act, which would prohibit abortions when an unborn child's heartbeat is detected, with the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of mother when necessary. I would yield 2 minutes to the representative from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Representative Fischbach, for hosting this special order tonight. Now, it's been 7 months since the Supreme Court's landmark decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, and in that time, we've seen incredible progress to protect life all around this country, including right here in Washington, D.C. Just last week, tens of thousands of families came out to the annual March for Life to peacefully and prayerfully show their support for the unborn. The week before that, the new pro-life Republican majority took steps to protect the unborn. We passed legislation to ensure babies who survive an abortion receive the health care they need and to condemn the attacks against pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. Now, all this is so important, but it's only the first step. Advocates and people of faith around the country are going to their state and federal lawmakers and asking for a change. And it's my hope that this Republican majority will continue to pass pro-life legislation. My real question is, where's the outrage? Where is the outrage? Nearly 1 million unborn children are expected to die in 2023 from abortion. In the United States of America, where protecting life is our highest calling, where we're the first responder anywhere in the world, anytime there's an attack on life, anytime there's a tragedy, anytime there's a need for somebody to come there to try and save lives. And yet, in 2023, 1 million of the unborn will be aborted. It is incredible to me, in a nation that has been blessed for so long with so much, can turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the cries of the unborn. My question is, where is the outrage, my fellow Americans? Where is the cry against this injustice that's taking place? Where are we standing? Not as a political party, but as citizens of the world. As I said earlier, if there's a cry for help anywhere on this globe, it is America that will be the first responder. It is America that will be there to save lives. It is America that will go to any end of the world to help. And yet in our own country, we are willing to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the abortion of over 1 million babies a year. Where is the outrage? I thank you, and I yield back, Ms. Fischbach.
Thank you very much. And we are here to speak up for the unborn, and we hear their cry, and we will continue to fight and hear the unborn. Mr. Speaker, the Congressman from Mississippi and the House Pro-Life Caucus Chair, Chris Smith, helped lead the amicus brief in support of Mississippi's Dobbs case. The amicus brief was joined by more than 200 members of Congress, including myself, and urged the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Congressman from Mississippi was instrumental in that fight. And I would like to yield 1 minute to the representative from Mississippi.
Mr. Speaker, on July 4, 1776, our founding fathers, in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, wrote these words that form the very foundation of our great nation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I stand before you today to say that we cannot, to say that we will not forget the duty of this Congress to defend the inalienable right to life. We cannot forget the devastating impact that Roe v. Wade caused on families and the unborn. That devastation would have continued if Dobbs v. Jackson, a case that proudly originated in my home state of Mississippi, had not come before the Supreme Court and opened the pathway to allow states to protect life. If our great nation can unite around any singular issue, it should be that life is sacred, that life is a gift from God, and that life should be protected. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of your work in defense of the unborn. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the Values Action Team Chair and long-standing protector of life. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come to you tonight, as a lot of my colleagues are doing, and recognizing the 50-year anniversary since the very flawed decision of Roe v. Wade. And although the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year, we cannot forget the lives that were lost during those almost 50 devastating years. The lives lost during the Roe era must serve as a reminder of why we continue to fight for life. I've said this before, and I will continue to say that I'm pro-life, I'm pro-family, and I'm pro-child. In the wake of the Dobbs decision, many states, like my home state of Alabama, have taken steps to protect the unborn. However, there is more work to be done when it comes to protecting the life of the innocent. Just last week, the annual March for Life took place here in Washington, D.C., as it has already been mentioned. But instead of marching on the Supreme Court, thousands of pro-life advocates marched on Congress. They know our work isn't finished, and they're calling on Congress to do our job to protect life. I'm proud to see that pro-life measures have already passed the House with bipartisan support in this new Congress. And also, I look forward to continued bipartisan efforts to protect the most vulnerable among us. And this should be, Mr. Speaker, a bipartisan issue. This anniversary serves as a solemn reminder of the tragic losses as a result of Roe v. Wade, but it also serves as a reminder that the fight for life is not over. I also want to thank Ms. Fischbach for her leadership and organizing this hour to uphold the sanctity of human life, and I yield back.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of the work that you have done, and we will continue our fight, and we will continue our work to protect unborn life. And now I would like to yield 2 minutes to the representative from Wisconsin. I yield 2 minutes.
Thank you. As has been mentioned, prior to 1973, there would be what I would consider a consensus in this country that it would be horrific to prematurely kill a child in the womb. At the time, there was a practical matter, only 2 or 3 states in which abortion was legal, and there were times in this country before then in which every state considered abortion illegal. We know what happened after Roe v. Wade. Over the next 50 years, over 73 million lives were cut short. People who would have had long lives, accomplished who knows how much. You can imagine how America would have changed if those people had actually lived. Recently, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and there was a lot of elation because of that. However, since that time, I think 6 states have had a referendum, and while it was widely believed that abortion should be illegal in 1973, despite the fact that we have had ultrasounds that time, despite the fact that again and again in workplaces we pass around pictures with the ultrasound showing children of 3 or 4 or 5 months old, American opinion was a disappointment. Even in conservative states like Michigan, like Kansas, like Montana, like Kentucky, the public voted pro-abortion. What can we make of this? Because we've had the ultrasound in between Roe v. Wade and now, we have to say that unfortunately, the people who should have been educating the public had failed to do their duty. And I call upon the churches, who in the last 50 years has allowed this shift of opinion to happen. And by the way, it should have been easy to explain why abortion was horrific because of the huge increase in ultrasounds. But instead, we are joining a handful of countries, Vietnam, North Korea, Red China, out there saying abortion legal in some states through birth. Is this how we repay our Maker for this wonderful country that we have? I call upon America to call upon the churches to educate the public what is right and wrong, and that every one of these children is a gift from God, and that it is time for America to wake up. I do believe right now we have as in so many other issues, a problem with the clergy in the country, but I hope Americans can ask their clergymen, where are you when these decisions are being made all around the country, and where are you when these referendums are coming before the people? We need more help from the mute clergy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your words and your commitment to the unborn. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes to a champion of life, my friend, the representative from Pennsylvania, and the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. I yield 2 minutes.
You got it all. And I thank the gentlelady from Minnesota for her leadership with this incredibly important special orders. Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight during this special order to reaffirm my commitment to protect and defend the sanctity of life. From the moment I stepped foot into this chamber in 2009, I cemented my promise to protect our most vulnerable, the unborn. Our founders enshrined in the Declaration of Independence 3 unalienable rights. The first is the right to life. Tonight, we celebrate the right to life. Last year, the Supreme Court made it clear determining the right to an abortion is the responsibility of the state through the people and their elected officials. Mr. Speaker, life matters. Friday marked the first March of Life since the end of Roe v. Wade. Tens of thousands convened in Washington to celebrate the change from a national culture of death to one of life. The evidence that life matters goes well beyond the Supreme Court, however, and the Supreme Court ruling that was finally delivered in 2022, shifting the defense of the innocent unborn to 50 state capitals. And here's the evidence of why we should also celebrate in addition to that ruling. In the United States, there are 2,500 pregnancy resource centers that support unborn babies and their parents. There are only 800 abortion clinics in this nation. That's an amazing shift in numbers. Of the practicing OBGYN doctors, 90% do not
perform abortion. So God bless the Pregnancy Resource Center staff that educate, encourage, and empower men and women to make informed life choices based on Christian principles and values. They're trained client advocates and medical personnel, including registered nurses, certified phlebotomy technicians, and registered diagnostic medical sonographers. Mr. Speaker, my position on life has always been clear. You can't be a champion for the future of this great country if you're going to limit its potential. It is my strong belief that every child, every human life is sacred and has a purpose in this world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady from Minnesota, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And thank you for your steadfast commitment to the unborn and strong support of the right to life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank all of my colleagues that spoke this evening for standing up to give a voice to the voiceless unborn children, for standing up for life. Our conference will continue to be strong for mothers and their unborn children. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Does the gentlelady have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I do move the House do now adjourn.
Question is a motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for a morning hour debate.